Hello everybody, mega goal number 3, second secondary, and this is the reading lesson for unit number 2, which is called crime puzzles on pages 26 and 27. درسنا اليوم راح يكون درس القراءة في unit number 2. Now let's take a look at the objectives, الأهداف. First, we should read the passage and answer the question. Second, we should discuss the given crimes. And third, we should discuss the characteristic of a good detective. راح طبعا نقرأ عشان نجاوب على الأسئلة. راح نناقش الجرائم اللي عندنا معطاة. درسنا اليوم راح يكون على الجرائم، فراح نناقش هذه الجرائم. And number 3 رقم 3 راح نناقش السمات اللي مفروض تكون متوفرة في المتحري الجيد. Now let's move on. Before we start this lesson, I'd like to revise with you the vocab that I have already explained in the previous video. But since that these words, you will find them in the reading passage, I thought about going through them very quickly. بالبداية راح أراجعكم بالكلمات اللي سبق وشرحتهم في الفيديو السابق، لكن بيكونوا موجودين في قطعة القراءة فبمر عليهم بسرعة. Now the first one is assumed or assume, gram, pavement, coincidence, right? Installed, suspect, display, insured. So these are the vocab that I have already explained. I hope that you memorize them by heart. أتمنى أنكم تحفظوهم. Now let's move on. Now before the reading, I'd like to ask you a question. If you have ever read mystery or crime stories, if you did, can you just tell me what mystery or crime stories have you read? Can you talk about the characters and the story? هل سبق وقرأتوا قصص غامضة أو قرأتوا أو مثلا قرأتوا قصص جرائم؟ If you did, ممكن تشاركوني بهذه المعلومات. Can you share this piece of information with me and leave it in the comment box below? Can you talk about the character and the story? ممكن تتكلموني عن القصة وكذلك تتكلموني عن الشخصيات. Now let's move on to the next slide. Reading. So today's title will be Crime Puzzles. Crime Puzzles on pages 26 and 27. Let's move on to pages 26 and 27. So as for today, we will be reading about two cases or two crimes. راح نقرأ اليوم عن قضيتين. Okay? And afterwards we will try to solve each one of them. راح نحاول نحل كل قضية منهم. So the first one is the case of the stolen jewels. Right now I'm gonna run the recording. I'd like you to follow up as you listen, and then later on we will discuss this crime and we will try to solve it together.
26 and 27. 8. Reading. Crime puzzles.
The case of the stolen jewels. Detective Combs was at the coffee shop around the corner when he learned that Jones's jewelry had been broken into. He arrived at the scene of the burglary in moments. Mr. Jones, the owner of the store, explained what had happened. I arrived this morning to open up the shop. As I walked up to my store, I noticed a lot of broken glass on the pavement. I looked up and realized that the display window had been broken. Combs looked out the broken window at the sidewalk, littered with glass. Mr. Jones continued. Then I saw that all of the jewelry from the display window was gone. The doors were still locked, so this must be where the burglar broke in. Why didn't the alarm go off? Asked Combs. It's a strange coincidence, said Mr. Jones. I removed our old alarm system yesterday and made an appointment to have a new one installed today. Combs looked around at the empty jewelry cases. I assume your jewelry was insured? Of course, said Mr. Jones. Thank goodness for that. Combs nodded and said, Mr. Jones, I believe there was a crime indeed, and it was committed by you. What crime does Combs suspect Mr. Jones of committing? Why?
Okay, so right now I'm gonna stop here and then I'm gonna go back to the PPT, and we will discuss the crime puzzle all together. So the first crime is the case of the stolen jewels, قضية المجوهرات المسروقة. So Detective Colmes was around the corner when he learned that the Jones jewelry has been broken into. كان المحقق جونز كان المحقق كولمز nearby لما عرف أن مجوهرات جونز تمت سرقتها. طبعا محل مجوهرات جونز. Okay? Now Mr. Jones, the owner of the store, said that when he arrived to open his store in the morning, he noticed a lot of broken glass on the pavement. لما أتى المالك عشان يفتح محله في الصباح لاحظ أن في بعض الزجاج المكسور على الرصيف. Now he realized as well that all the jewelry from the display window was gone. The doors were still locked, so this must be where the burglar broke in. طبعا نلاحظ أن المجوهرات اللي في نافذة العرض كلها مسروقة. طبعا كانت الأبواب were locked، كانت الأبواب مغلقة. So the window must be the place where the burglar broke in. يعني أن السارق ممكن اقتحم المحل عن طريق النافذة لأن الأبواب كانت مغلقة. Now the detective realized that the alarm didn't go off. Mr. Jones said that he removed the old alarm and made an appointment to have a new one installed today. المحقق لاحظ أن جرس الإنذار لم يتم إطلاقه. يعني عادة لما مثلا يكون في شيء غير معتاد أو مثلا سرقة ممكن جرس الإنذار يعطي تنبيه. لكن what a coincidence من قبيل المصادفة أن مستر جونز الأونر كان شايل الألارم القديم، جرس الإنذار القديم، ومسوي موعد عشان يركب الجديد في نفس اليوم. Now Colmes, the detective, assumed that the jewelry was insured, which was true, and Colmes believed that the crime was committed by Mr. Jones himself. طبعا بدأ المتحري كولمز أو المحقق افترض أن طبعا أن المجوهرات مأمن عليها، وفعلا هذا كان صحيح. بعدين توصل إلى استنتاج أن الجريمة تم ارتكابها من قبل مستر جونز اللي هو المالك. Now, why do you think Colmes believes that the burglar or the burglary was committed by the owner? لماذا باعتقادكم يعني تمت سرقة بواسطة المالك؟ Well, for a start, the detective suspected that Mr. Jones committed the burglary in order to collect the insurance money. أول حاجة اعتقد أن أكيد أن هو ارتكب الجريمة علشان ياخذ فلوس التأمين. مثل ما أنتم عارفين أن لما عندنا مثلا أشياء ثمينة نأمن عليها في حالة فقدانها أو سرقتها يعوضون شركات التأمين بفلوس يعني. فذاتس why the detective suspected of Mr. Jones. Also, another reason behind this, في سبب ثاني, that the broken window glass as well was broken from the inside, not from the outside, and that was Colmes's clue. طبعا لو تلاحظون ان لما جاء مستر جونز علشان يفتح المحل لاحظ ان الزجاج مكسور وعلى الرصيف. هنا طبعا لاحظ المحقق ان النافذة تم كسرها من داخل المحل وليس من الخارج، لأن لو كانت الزجاجة يعني النافذة تم كسرها من الخارج كان بيكون الجلاس أو الزجاج المنكسر مفروض يكون داخل المحل. لكن in this case في هذه الحالة the glass was broken from the inside من داخل المحل. That's why the broken glass was on the pavement. Okay? Now let's move on to the next case. The next case is the case of the bowling alley murder. قضية قتل. Okay? So get ready to listen to this case and then afterwards We will discuss it and try to solve this puzzle all together.
The case of the bowling alley murder. The Center Street bowling alley, the oldest bowling alley in the city, closed at midnight. At 4 a.m., the janitor found a terrible sight. A man with a knife in his back lying in one of the lanes. Detective Combs quickly arrived at the scene with a swarm of police officers. "Anybody know the victim?" asked Combs. "I do," said one of the officers. "That's Bob Reynolds. He's running for councilman. He and Mike Jenner have been having a bitter campaign battle." "Perhaps we should pay Mr. Jenner a visit," said Combs. Before leaving the bowling alley, Combs took his cell phone out of his pocket and left it behind. On arriving at Mike Jenner's house, Combs told Jenner, "I have some grim news. Bob Reynolds has been murdered." "No, I can't believe it," cried Jenner. "We'd like to speak with you about the murder, but first I need to get back to the police station to file the report. Can you meet me at the station?" "Of course. I'll help in any way I can." "I'll give you a call." Combs patted his pocket. "Uh-oh, I must have left my cell phone at the bowling alley. Would you mind picking it up and bringing it with you to the station?" Jenner looked confused, but said, "Sure, I'll do anything to help with the investigation." Later that day, Jenner brought Combs' cell phone to the station. He was arrested and charged with murder. Why?
Okay, so we will stop here right now and then we will discuss the case of the bowling alley murder. Okay, so the case of the bowling alley murder. At 4 a.m., the janitor of the Center Street bowling alley found a man with a knife in his back lying in one of the lanes. Okay, الساعة تقريبا 4 صباحا the janitor اللي هو الحارس يعني وجد شخص في طبعا the Center Street bowling alley شخص مطعون في ظهره. Okay, now let's move on. Now, Detective Combs quickly arrived at the scene with a swarm of police officers. The victim was Bob Reynolds. He was running for a councilman. طبعا حضر المحقق كولمز مع مجموعة من الشرطة لمسرح الجريمة. Okay, to the scene. The victim الضحية كان بوب رينولد وكان مرشح إنه يكون مستشار. Now, Bob and Mike Jenner were having a bitter campaign battle. كان بينه وبين المرشح اللي مترشح ضده كانت بينهم معركة شوي يعني شرسة لحد ما أو مرة يعني معركة بينهم في الانتخابات. دائما تعرفون إنه يكون أحيانا في campaign battles. Now, Combs thought that he should pay Mr. Jenner a visit, but before leaving the bowling alley, he left his cell phone behind. Okay, هو فكر إنه بيزور اللي هو المترشح ضده اللي هو مستر جينر، بس قبل ما يترك البولينج alley فكر إنه يترك جواله as his cell phone behind him on purpose يعني بشكل متعمد. Now, when Mr. Jenner heard that Bob was murdered, he didn't believe the grim news. طبعا لما أخبروه أن بوب قتل لم يصدق الأخبار السيئة. Okay, he didn't believe the grim news. Now, Combs told Mr. Jenner that he had to go back to the police station and asked him to meet him there. Combs was searching his pocket looking for his cell phone. طبعا طلب من مستر جينر انه يلتقي معه في يعني البوليس ستيشن. اوكي، مركز الشرطة. لكن لما كان كولمز بيغادر فتش جيوبه وما لقى طبعا جواله عنده السيل فون. Then he told Mr. Jenner that he had left his cell phone at the bowling alley and asked him to pick it up from there. Mr. Jenner didn't mind. طبعا ذكر هو قال له ان انا فقدت جوالي في يعني جهازي الخليوي او جوالي في the bowling alley. اوكي فطلب منه انه يحضر له. Mr. Jenner didn't mind, لم يمانع. Now when Jenner brought Colm's cell phone, he was arrested and charged. لما أحضر جواله تم القبض عليه واتهامه بعملية القتل. ليش تتوقعون؟ Why do you think Jenner was arrested and charged for murdering Bob? Why do you think? لماذا تم اتهامه بقتل بوب؟ For a start, Detective Combs didn't tell Mr. Jenner in which bowling alley the murder took place. لم يخبره في أي مكان يعني محل الجريمة. يعني في ممكن يكونون محلات كثيرة حق البولينج فما أخبره أي واحد بالضبط اللي هو the Center Street bowling alley. Yet Mr. Jenner knew which bowling alley to go for Colms's phone, so he must have known where the murder took place because he was there. مع ذلك أحضر تليفونه وذهب إلى محل البولينج بدون ما يسأل فأكيد هو أساسا كان موجود هناك في مسرح الجريمة أو لا علاقة somehow. So you understand right now why Detective Combs accused Jenner of murdering Bob. Now let's move on to the next slide. Now after the reading we have here a couple of questions that you should answer either with true or false. True صح, false خطأ. Now I'd like you to pause the video and read the questions very carefully and try to answer the statements if they are either true or false. Now let's do this all together. The first one, Detective Combs was at the police station when he heard about the robbery. This is false. He was nearby. The broken glass was inside the store. This is false. It was outside the store. The Center Street bowling alley is the only bowling alley in the city. Of course not. This is false. It's not the only one. Mike Jenner was Bob Reynolds' friend. This is wrong. He wasn't. They were running against each other for cancelman. Now Combs left his cell phone at the bowling alley on purpose. Of course he did that on purpose. كان متعمد إنه يترك جواله. Now let's move on to the speaking parts. This is mainly should be done in class, but I'm gonna do it very brief with you. Now, what are the characteristics that make a good a detective? What do you think the characteristics are of making a good detective? إيش تتوقعون السمات اللي يعني السمات اللي تخلي المحقق محقق جيد مثل Detective Combs? Maybe you've heard of some of the famous detectives. ممكن تكون سمعتوا عن المتحريين جيدين مثلا شارلوك هولمز من المتحرين الجيدين اللي لهم سمعة وكذلك في كثير من الأفلام والمسلسلات تتكلم عنه. So probably a good detective should be able to solve problems قادر إنه يحل المشاكل. He also should have a clear vision رؤية واضحة and should be a critical thinker يعني مفكر ناقد. Also a good detective should have as well an understanding of human behavior and psychology. لازم يكون إن المحقق الجيد عنده دراية بتصرفات البشر ونفسياتهم عشان يربطها. A good detective as well should have an open mind. لازم يكون ذهنه متفتح. Okay? So these are a couple of the things that I could come up with of the characteristic of a good detective. يعني السمات اللي ممكن تكون موجودة في المتحري الجيد. If you by any chance know any of these characteristics, you can leave them down in the comment box. ممكن تتركون لي في بوكس التعليقات السمات اللي ممكن تكون موجودة في المتحري الجيد. So I said having an open mind, being able to think clearly and solve a problem. Also they should have a sense of creativity, لازم يكون عندهم ابتكار. Also a knowledge of human behavior and psychology. As well as I said, they should they should be capable of critical thinking اللي هو التفكير الناقد. Now as for the speaking part, this is something that should be done in class, and this is pretty easy. You just need to take your time, read the questions very carefully, اقرأ الأسئلة بتمعن, and afterwards you can discuss them with your teacher in class or with your classmates. Now that's it for this lesson. I hope that you found this lesson very enjoyable. أتمنى أنكم استمتعتوا. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends, and if you have a question of any kind, just leave it down in the comment box below. Till next time, have a good one.